Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is your host, Saucy McFoodlefist, and today, well, for the fourth time today, I'm making a video, and this is Have a Read With Me, episode 3 or 2, depending on how you look at it. The second episode was kind of a bonus episode, so I don't know how I'm going to name it, but, let's get into it. We're going to pick up right where we left off. This is Newell Knight's account of Joseph Smith from They Knew the Prophet. As the constable was driving briskly along, one of the wagon wheels came off, which accident left them almost in the hands of the mob who pursued them closely. But the constable was an expert man and managed to get the wheel on again before the mob overtook him, and soon left them in the rear once more. He drove on to the town of South Bainbridge, Chenango County, when he lodged Joseph in the upper room of a tavern, in order that all might be safe for himself and Joseph. He slept during the night with his feet against the door, and kept a loaded gun by him. Joseph occupied a bed in the same room, and declared that if they were unlawfully molested, he would fight for Joseph and defend him to the utmost of his ability. On the following day, a court was convened for the purpose of investigating the charges which had been made against Joseph Smith, Jr., on account of many scandalous reports which had been put in circulation. A great excitement prevailed. My father, Joseph Knight, Sr., excuse me, did not let the opportunity pass of doing all in his power to assist the persecuted boy. He went to two of his neighbors, James Davidson and John Reed, Esquire, respectable farmers, who were well versed in the laws of their country, and retained them in behalf of Joseph during his trial. The trial commenced among a crowded multitude of spectators. Among the witnesses called up against Joseph was one Josiah Stoll, a gentleman for whom Joseph formerly worked. He was examined as follows. Question: did not the prisoner, Joseph Smith, have a horse from you? Answer: yes. Question: did he not go to you and tell you an angel had appeared unto him, and told him to get the horse from you? Answer: no, he told me no such thing. Question: well, how did he get the horse from you? Answer: he bought it from me the same as any other man would. Question: have you had your pay? Answer: that is not your business. The question being repeated, the witness replied, I hold his note for the price of the horse, which I consider as good as the money, for I am well acquainted with Joseph Smith, Jr., and know him to be an honest, and, if he wishes, I am ready to let him have another horse on the same terms. Mr. Jonathan Thompson was next called and examined. Question: has not the prisoner Joseph Smith, Jr., had a yoke of oxen of you? Answer: yes. Question: did he not obtain them from you by telling you that he had a revelation to the effect that he was to have them? Answer: no. He did not mention a word of any kind concerning the oxen. He purchased them as any other man would. After several more similar attempts, the court was detained for a time in order that two young ladies, daughters of Josiah Stoll, with whom Joseph had at many times kept company, might be sent for in order, if possible, to elicit something from them which could be made a pretext against Joseph. The young ladies came and were each examined as to his character and conduct in general, but in particular as to his behavior towards them in public and private. They both bore such testimony in Joseph's favor as to leave his enemies without a cause for complaint. Several attempts were made to prove something against Joseph, and even circumstances which were alleged to have taken place in Broome County were brought forward. But these Joseph's lawyers would not admit against him. In consequence of his persecutors managed to detain the court until they had succeeded in obtaining a warrant from Broome County. The warrant they served upon him at the very moment he had been acquitted by the court. The constable who served the second warrant upon Joseph no sooner arrested him than he began to abuse him. So heartless was he that although Joseph had been kept all day in court without anything to eat since the morning, he hurried him off to Broome County, a distance of about 15 miles, before allowing him to eat. The constable took him to a tavern where he gathered a number of men who used every means to abuse, ridicule, and insult him. They spit upon him, pointing their fingers at him, saying, "Prophesy, prophesy." Thus did they imitate those who crucified the Savior of mankind, not knowing what they did. The tavern was but a short distance from Joseph's own house. He wished to spend the night with his wife, offering to give any bail desired for his appearance, but this was denied him. He applied for something to eat. The constable ordered him some crusts of bread and some water, which was the only fare he received that night. At length he retired to bed. The constable made him lie next to the wall. He then laid himself down, threw his arms around Joseph, as if fearing that he intended to escape, and in this manner was Joseph compelled to spend the night. Next day he was brought before the magistrate's court of Colesville, Broome County, and placed on trial. His friends and lawyers were again at his side, and his former persecutors were arrayed against him with the rage of fury of demons visible upon their countenances, and manifested in their actions. Many witnesses were again examined, some of whom swore to the most palpable falsehoods, just as those had done who appeared against him in the previous day. But they contradicted themselves so plainly that the court would not admit their testimony. Excuse me. Others were called who showed by their zeal that they were willing to prove anything against him, but all they could do was tell some things that they had heard somebody else say about him. They proceeded for a considerable time in this frivolous and vexatious manner, when finally I was called upon and examined by lawyer Seymour, who had been sent specially for this occasion. One lawyer, Birch, who was also retained on the prosecution. But Mr. Seymour seemed to be a more zealous Presbyterian, and seemed more anxious and determined that the people should not be deluded by any one professing godliness, and not denying the power thereof. As soon as I had been sworn, Mr. Seymour proceeded to interrogate me as follows. Question: did the prisoner, Joseph Smith, Jr., cast the devil out of you? Answer: no, sir. Question: why have you not had the devil cast out of you? Answer: yes, sir. Question: and had not Joseph Smith some hand in it being done? Answer: yes, sir. Question: and did he not cast him out of you? Answer: no, sir. it was done by the power of God, and Joseph Smith was an instrument in the hands of God on this occasion. He commanded him to come out of me in the name of Jesus Christ. Question: and are you sure it was the devil? Answer: yes, sir. Question: did you see him after he was cast out of you? Answer: yes, sir, I saw him. Question: pray, what did he look like? In parentheses, here are some of the lawyers on the part of the defense. Here, one of the lawyers on the part of the defense told me I need not answer that question. I replied, I believe I need not answer you that question, but I will do it if I am allowed to ask you one, and you can answer it. Do you, Mr. Seymour, understand the things of the Spirit? No, answered Mr. Seymour, I do not pretend to such big things. Well, then, I replied, it will be of no use for me to tell you what the devil looked like, for it was a spiritual sight, and spiritually discerned, and, of course, you would not understand it were I to tell you of it. The lawyer dropped his head, while the loud laugh of the audience proclaimed his discomfiture. Mr. Seymour now addressed the court, and in a long and violent harangue endeavored to blacken the character of Joseph Smith and bring him guilty of the charges preferred against him. Messrs. Davidson and Reed followed on Joseph's behalf. They held forth in true colors the nature of the prosecution, the malignity of intention, and the apparent disposition of the prosecution to persecute their client rather than to do him justice. They took up the different arguments that had been brought forward by the lawyers for the prosecution, and having shown their utter futility and misapplication, they proceeded to scrutinize the evidence which had been adduced, and each in his turn thanked God that he had not been engaged in so good a cause as that of defending a man whose character stood so well the test of such a strict investigation. In fact, these men, although not regular lawyers, were upon this occasion able to silence their opponents and convince the court that Joseph Smith Jr. was innocent. They spoke like men inspired of God, while those who were arrayed against Joseph trembled under the sound of their voices and shook before them as criminals before the bar of justice. Disappointment and shame were depicted on the faces of the assembled multitude, who now began to learn that nothing could be sustained against Joseph Smith. The constable who had arrested Joseph and treated him in so cruel and heartless a manner came forward and apologized and asked his forgiveness for the ill treatment he had given him. So much was this man changed that he told Joseph the mob had resolved, if the court acquitted him, that they would take him, tar and feather him, and ride him on a rail, and further, that if Joseph wished, he would lead him out another way, so that he could escape in safety. After all the efforts of the people and court to sustain the charges brought against Joseph proved to be an entire failure, he was discharged and succeeded in making good his escape from the mob through the instrumentality of his new friend, the constable. After a few days, accompanied by Oliver Cowdery, came to my house. After a few days, the prophet, accompanied by Oliver Cowdery, came to my house, intending to confirm those who had been baptized. These servants of God had scarcely arrived when the mob began to collect, and so violent were they that it was thought best for Joseph and Oliver to make their escape, lest they should suffer at the hands of our enemies. They left without taking any refreshment, the mob closely pursuing them, and it was oft times as much as Joseph and Oliver could do to escape them. However, suffer by traveling all night, excepting a short time when they were forced to lie down and rest themselves under a tree, alternately watching and sleeping. They managed to get beyond the reach of their pursuers. Alright, that's going to be the end of this video. It went a little bit longer than I intended, but we'll continue with Newell Knight's testimony of Joseph Smith in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and goodbye, everyone.